This incident occurred while Agus and 4 friends were climbing Mount Dempo on January 3rd, 2025. If you recall, on that date, there was widespread news about a 22-year-old climber who died on Mount Dempo on New Year's Eve. Even as Agus and his friends climbed, the evacuation process for the victim was still underway. At first, their journey seemed normal, like any other climb. But who would have thought that a night on Mount Dempo would turn into a truly surreal experience? It was a long holiday. Agus and his friends, Cinta, Naya, Damar, and Rian, had planned their climb well in advance. Agus, Cinta, and Naya were in college, while Damar and Ryan were still in high school. What worried Agus was that Damar and Rian had never climbed a mountain before, and their first climb was straight to Mount Dempo. The mountain is known for its steep trails, dense forests, and unpredictable weather. But everything was ready. They had complete equipment, secured logistics, and were even willing to chip in to rent outdoor gear. The only problem was that someone else had rented their flashlights. In the end, they planned to rent flashlights directly at base camp. On January 2nd, Agus and Naya came to Cinta's house to stay overnight before leaving at dawn for Mount Dempo. That night, Agus had trouble sleeping. Instead, he made coffee in the kitchen, waking Cinta's mother. Before going back to sleep, Cinta's mother said, "Agus, please take care of my children, especially Damar. He's a bit sensitive about things like that." Those words kept ringing in Agus's head. The next morning, they set off for the Kampung Empat base camp. On the way, Agus began to see numerous Basarnas vehicles and SR teams descending from the mountain. Upon arriving at the base camp, a climber said, "There's been a disaster up there, bro. A climber has died." The climb was temporarily closed. However, strangely, as the day progressed, climbers were allowed back up. Finally, after Friday prayers, they began their ascent. The initial journey was smooth, although heavy rain began to fall. Upon arriving at Shelter 1, Agus saw an old man sitting alone, watching them. The old man said, "Be careful on the road. Take care of your friends, especially the one at the front." He pointed to Damar. However, when Agus told his friends about this, none of them seemed to see the old man. Because the rain persisted, they decided to set up camp at Shelter 1. That night, their tent was the only one there. Everyone fell asleep quickly from exhaustion. Everyone except Agus. He sat alone outside the tent, smoking a cigarette, enjoying the silence of the forest. Suddenly, Cinta's cell phone rang. It was her mother calling just to check on them. After that, silence returned. Agus tried to play with his phone, but it suddenly died completely, even though the battery was still more than half full. He went back inside the tent and tried to sleep. But before he could fall asleep, he heard a woman's voice whisper right next to him, "Be careful on the road." Agus immediately felt goosebumps. He was sure the voices weren't his friends. When he turned on the tent light and looked up, there was a large black shadow on the tent ceiling. The figure slowly became clearer. It had red eyes, sharp teeth. It seemed to be embracing the entire tent from the outside. Agus immediately covered his face with his sleeping bag and recited prayers non-stop until he finally fell asleep from exhaustion. The next morning, they continued their journey to the summit. They passed the famous climb called Dinding Lemari, an extreme route known for being slippery and dangerous. Everything went smoothly until they finally descended from the summit to the bottom. That's when everything changed. Damar suddenly said, "Bang, just leave me here. You guys go down first." His face was pale, his body was trembling. Shortly after, Damar began to become disoriented, talking to himself, and then suddenly fell into a trance. His voice became heavy. "Don't bother my grandson." After saying that, he immediately fainted. Throughout the descent, Damar repeatedly fell into a trance. Sometimes he laughed to himself, sometimes he cried, sometimes he hit his own head. Even more frightening, Agus felt like someone was constantly following them. The sound of footsteps was clearly audible, but every time he shone a flashlight, there was no one there. They had been walking for a long time. Too long. The descent shouldn't have taken that long. The rain, the mud, the exhaustion, and the constant terror that haunted them had completely shattered their mental state. At one point, Agus even said to Naya, "If I don't come home, please take care of my parents." These words made Naya burst into tears. After successfully descending and reaching base camp before dawn, Damar finally opened up. It turned out that before all the incidents began,